From the National Catholic Register, this is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
The Catholic Church must prepare for the coming battle of despair. That is a sobering call from our guest this week on Register Radio, Register contributor Ambassador Alberto Fernandez, who has a cautionary statement for the Church and for all of us that in the years to come, the Church may find itself poorer than ever before and yet needed more than ever before. And then, EWTN News' Europe Correspondent Solene Tadie tells us about Paris' Other Notre Dame, the shrine with 37,000 answered prayers. Hello, I'm Matthew Bunson, Vice President, Editorial Director of EWTN News and host of Register Radio. Joined in studio, as always, and whenever possible, by my co-host, Shannon Mullen, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register. How are you, Shannon?
Very well. Good to be with you, Matthew.
So the title of the commentary from Ambassador Fernandez certainly is very eye-catching. I know that as we are speaking right now, it is the number one most trending piece at ncregister.com. It's an important commentary, however, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome Ambassador Fernandez back to our program. Once again, Ambassador, we seem to be finding a way to bring you on about a topic that's not exactly fun, but important. And so thank you, as always, for making the time for us.
Thank you, Matthew and Shannon. Always a pleasure to be on with you.
Before we dive into the battle of despair, as you put it, could you give us, if you could, just a brief update of where things stand right now in the Middle East, in particular with Iran, Oman, and the Strait of Hormuz, because I know our listeners and our readers are always grateful for your commentary.
Well, we're in this situation of a kind of no war, no peace, or war by other means situation in the confrontation between the Iranian regime and the United States. It's a challenge of who can outlast whom. Both sides, both the Americans and the Iranian regime, think that or are portraying themselves as if time is on their side. It's a deadly, volatile situation. There's a lot of oil getting through, not as much as there was before the war started. So we're in this very, very volatile, risky gray area that doesn't seem to have any end in the near future.
Ambassador Fernandez, one question I want to ask you. On the Iran side, their leverage seems to be, or at least in their view, the midterm elections, and that they believe that President Trump's going to be motivated to do some kind of a deal to just kind of get this off the radar of voters. Do you think that's a valid point or a valid piece of leverage that they have or not?
Well, they certainly think it is. They know, they read the polling, they know that the war is generally unpopular, even though the polls also show that Iran is not popular in the United States. The Iranian regime is not popular. But the war is not popular. And they know there's economic pressure. People are concerned about high prices. There's an election coming. And so certainly they think that is a way of pressuring the Americans. The question is, what do they do about it? And do they overdo the thing? Also, do they try to do some kind of October surprise to try to increase the pressure on the United States, which could backfire? So there's a lot we don't know about the regime, but certainly they see an opportunity which they will seize upon.
All right. Well, thank you for that update. It in some ways leads us to your brilliant commentary on the coming battle of despair, because we look at a situation like Iran that seems so intractable, and this is one more thing that people seem to be worrying about. But I also wanted to make note of the fact that you very courageously start your piece with a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, that before descending into madness, he wrote, "If we have our own why of life, we shall get along with almost any how." And I think that's a beautiful way to frame your commentary. What were you hoping to accomplish with this piece?
Well, I was struck by the recent suicide of this professor at Cambridge, whose whole life came tumbling down. And that was a kind of unusual situation. It's an unusual case. But generally in the West, we see certain trends coming about. And there's no doubt polling shows that there is an increase in what are known as deaths of despair. The latest generation coming up, Generation Z, is the most medicated and anxious generation in history. At the same time, there's all this talk about the workplace changing, the workplace evolving. So the two questions were, in my mind, were how will the church respond in an age of increasing despair? And how will the church respond in a world where work, which so often gives us meaning, either loses that meaning or ceases to exist? Now, the church is neither a business company nor a psychiatrist, right? I mean, the church has, first of all, is about the salvation of souls. But certainly we respond to a reality that we see around us. And so the challenge is, how will the church have to move to try to respond to these changing circumstances?
Ambassador, let's talk just briefly about the case you cited, Jason Arde. What about his death, other than it being in the news, in recent days, do you think is kind of emblematic of the crisis you're seeing?
Well, I think it's emblematic in the sense that what do you do or what happens to you when everything that seems important to you is taken away, whether that's prestige or the meaning that comes in work or titles or possessions or whatever. Obviously, not every poor person or not every person that loses everything kills themselves, right? Some people do and some people don't. And some people sadly take their own lives over trifles. Others endure great suffering. So this is a mystery, of course, that we confront in what goes on in the troubled minds of people under pressure. That's kind of what I was trying to get at, that here was a very dramatic, graphic case of that happening. People tried to look at it, in that case, the Jason Arde case, about, woke versus non-woke, or whether he was an innocent or whether he was, a con man. Those are all significant issues, but I was more looking at it within the context of a person who had seemingly lost everything and how they responded.
Yeah, you make the point, and I quoted that right at the beginning here, that, as you note, the church may find itself poorer than ever before. And yet the task of the church never changes. It is to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world, to save souls. From your vantage point, looking globally as you do, how is the church actually positioned well to do that today, despite all of these immense challenges?
I think there is, I don't know if I call it a silver lining, but there's a reality that the church in many parts of the world has to deal with, is forced to deal with, and I think church leaders willingly do so, have to deal in situations of great suffering, of poverty, of turmoil. We see this very much in the global south. We see it in Africa and places like Nigeria. So certainly the church has experience in dealing with crises. This is nothing new in the church. In a way, I guess my one caveat in the piece, from the piece that I would add, is that looking at more about the situation of the church and the situation of people in the West, in the kind of comfortable West, that's a given, that we think that's always going to be that way. And it could very well wind up being that our situation is not going to be that different than the church in poorer countries with a lot more stress, a lot more turmoil and crises, political and economic, that they have to deal with.
Ambassador, can we return to the Nietzsche quote that your piece begins with? If we have our own why of life, we shall get along with almost any how. What does that mean?
Well, for me, it means that you have to be tethered to something, that our lives have to have some kind of core. Obviously, as a Christian, as a Catholic, I believe that is related intimately with faith in Jesus Christ and his salvation and his sacrifice and all of that, all of the supernatural message of the gospel. Some people find meaning in other things, but you have to find meaning in something. you have to have some kind of core or basis or tether, as I say. Otherwise, your life is untethered. It blows away according to the wind, according to circumstances. People do need to be grounded. And we're in a crisis of where people find themselves to feel that they are groundless. And that is a very dangerous situation for people to be in.
Yeah, well, Ambassador, thank you so much for your commentary. I know people are really taking it to heart. They're reading it. And we're also grateful for, as ever, your expertise on the Middle East and beyond.
Thank you, and God bless.
Again, the Ambassador's piece is The Catholic Church Must Prepare for the Coming Battle of Despair. You can find it at ncregister.com. You're listening to Register Radio here on EWTN Radio. Next up, Shannon and I talk with Solene Tadie about the Other Notre Dame in Paris. Stay tuned.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
Welcome back. I'm Matthew Bunson here with Shannon Mullen, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register. Well, as preparations continue for Pope Leo XIV's September visit to France, a great deal of understandable attention is being given to his planned journey to the restored Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, of course, as well as Lourdes. There is, however, a lesser-known basilica that deserves a lot more attention than it has been getting over these decades. It has ties to Saints Thérèse of Lisieux and Jean-Henry Newman, as well as the Augustinians and even Mozart. Solene Tadie has a recent piece on this extraordinary church, and she joins us now. She is EWTN News' European correspondent. Solene, welcome back to Register Radio.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Well, the title of your posted piece is Paris' Other Notre Dame, the shrine with 37,000 answered prayers. What church are we talking about?
Yes, absolutely, Matthew. I think it's a wonderful church, and it's really unknown. A lot of people have heard, of course, of all the great places of worship in Paris, and they know, of course, Notre Dame, Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal, but very few people know Notre Dame des Victoires, which is a very highly symbolic church, literally by the stock exchange of Paris. It's really at the heart of Paris. And it's such a special place because, first of all, its walls are entirely covered with ex-votos. So over 37,000 marble plaques, thanking the Virgin Mary, Our Lady, for prayers that were answered through her intercession, which is huge. There are not many places like that in the world. It's what is fascinating as well is that it's almost, let's say, a hidden spiritual history of Paris written on the walls, because you see all these beautiful stories of conversion, of miracles that adorn the walls of this beautiful architecture gem. You know, you have all these Baroque style of the time. It was built. The story and the name of Our Lady of Victory goes all the way back to Louis XIII. The church was founded after the king made a vow connecting to his victory at La Rochelle against the Protestants. It was in 1628. So it was built out of victory. It's a vow that to Our Lady, if she intercedes for strong prayers, then that's how the church was built. And then the ex-votos show that she has been at work for several centuries now.
Solene, as you know, the genesis of this story was really the testimony of my former pastor, Monsignor Robert Pankey, who went on a trip to France some months ago and came back and told us about this other Notre Dame. And he said he really described it as a kind of a power center, a very holy place. I think he described it almost like, you know, there are places on the earth where, you know, the veil between this world and the next are pretty thin, and this is one of those places. You've been there. I'm wondering, do you feel that?
Absolutely. I've been there. It's such a special place. Again, outside this beautiful architectural style that shows also the Counter-Reformation and everything, but when you're inside, you really feel this divine presence. And I've actually made a very strong prayer there. Even lit a novena, a candle there for 9 days, and prayed my novena while back in Rome. And it had an incredible effect. And so I really believe that so many prayers were answered through Our Lady's intercession there. And of course, one of the very famous miracles that happened there is one for Saint Therese of Lisieux. When she became gravely ill at the age of 10, and her father had a novena of masses offered for her there at Our Lady of Victories. And she recovered miraculously and attributed her healing to the Virgin Mary. And on her way to Rome to ask Pope Leo XIII for permission to enter the Carmel, she went there herself. And then she wrote that she really felt when she was there that all the remaining doubts about this childhood grace disappeared. She was absolutely convinced that there was a very strong intercession and a very strong divine presence there.
Yeah, you also document the survival of this church through the great tumultuous decades of the French Revolution and Napoleon. You talk about the fortitude of the Augustinian friars who had built the church to begin with.
Yes, that's why it was also interesting to mention this beautiful place ahead of the Pope's visit to Paris, because it was entrusted originally to the Augustinians until the French Revolution. And then, of course, it was taken away from them. But there is still this, this Augustinian presence, because they were there at that foundation. And like you say, this place embodies a series of victories. So Our Lady of Victories becomes almost prophetic through its very name, which I think is pretty amazing, because in the 19th century, there was a strong loss of, at the parish priest. It was in 1936. He was in a terrible situation. His ministry was not bearing any fruit. He was even considering resigning. And then he heard a voice while celebrating Mass, asking him to consecrate his parish to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. He did so, and after just a few days, the miracle happened again. A week later, hundreds of people started showing up at his Mass, 10 times his usual congregation. So the very name, Our Lady of Victory, is a victory for conversion. It's a victory for miracles when you are sick, when you are facing life difficulties. And I wrote this piece also to encourage many people to unite in prayer around that special place. And all those who are going to do the trip as well for Pope Leo, I would really recommend them to go and see the place for themselves and make a prayer, ask for anything, because Our Lady can really intercede.
Yeah, Solene, we'll, I think, have you back when it gets closer to the Pope's trip to France in late September, but let's just get a little bit of a sneak peek. First, I just wanted to ask you, what is the mood in France and in Paris and Lourdes right now in expectation of the Holy Father's visit?
There seemed to be a huge enthusiasm around this trip that was unexpected. I mean, of course, we expected some young people from some part of the country to get excited about it, but when they opened up the tickets for the Mass at both the youth vigil and the outdoor Mass on the Champs-Élysées, Place de la Concorde, the tickets were completely sold out immediately. So there seemed to be something very strong. So the trip will be between Paris, Lourdes, and Metz, and each one has a very distinct meaning. Of course, I will be watching very closely the Pope's meeting with catechumens, because there is this current revival of the faith among Catholics in France, newly baptized Catholics, and the Pope has noticed that, of course, because right now there is even an ecclesial assembly taking place in the Paris region. Bishops are literally gathering for the first time to discuss this surge in new catechumens. So it's something. There is a momentum, and I'm so happy that the Pope is going right now, because it could bear incredible spiritual fruit for this wave of revival that is also touching neighboring countries, the whole of Europe, really. And so I think it's like a very timely moment. And so he's not simply visiting a church in decline like many people are thinking, a country that has just adopted a law on euthanasia. Pope Leo is visiting a church, a country with very strong signs of renewal, and a lot of it, all these signs are becoming very difficult to ignore.
Yeah, to that issue of euthanasia, the official motto for Pope Leo XIV's Apostolic Journey to France is, the English translation is, that the world may have life. Of course, from John 6:51. What is the significance of that motto, and is it also sending a message to France and beyond?
It is obviously sending a message, and I believe Pope Leo will try and be very careful, as it's according to his own personal style. And people were expecting him to actually to somehow call out on the French authorities because of this new law. But now that he has changed his itinerary, he's not visiting this place for palliative care in Paris anymore. It is believed that Lourdes will be the spiritual heart of this trip, and that he will speak about the value of life in favor of the unborn, the sick, people with disabilities, the elderly, only in Lourdes and probably not in Paris, but we cannot know for sure. But right now we believe that Pope Leo will avoid somehow to say strong words to politicians in Paris. He will try to be very diplomatic, but probably pronounce very strong words in defense of life in Lourdes.
Yeah, he has certainly been willing to be very blunt in some of his language, as he forecast at the time of his election.
Solene,
absolutely, yes.
A piece you wrote for the Register some months ago. You had been back at Easter, correct, and visited a number of churches where they are experiencing this revival. And you talked to a bunch of people who were sort of on fire for the faith. What were some of the takeaways from that assignment?
What was very interesting is that it showed me that a lot of cliches around these new converts can be debunked very easily, because some people believe it is all confined to Versailles or just some very high bourgeoisie parish churches in Paris. And it's not the case, because you have very strong waves of conversion in very popular districts of Paris, like more of working class districts of Paris. And you have also different liturgies that are attracting a lot of young people, whether the Latin Mass, but also charismatic movements like the Emmanuel. So there is, we could not say that there is a real one profile of these new converts. They are coming from very different backgrounds. I met converts from Islam. I met people who were part of families where everybody had been baptized, but they were the only one where the parents literally had given up and say, "Oh, we'll see if this child will get baptized or not." And then people who were never ever raised in any kind of faith and realized, reaching adulthood, that their life was completely deprived of meaning, and start asking questions, and especially during the pandemic, that had been a huge catalyst for a lot of people. And so I spoke with all these people, and they say, I was welcomed in this great popular parish church, and the priest there just it was a Sunday, he was super busy, and he just took 1 hour of his time to just talk to me and answer my very basic questions. So maybe I'm not worthless after all, and maybe the church is willing to welcome me. And so that's all these beautiful stories holding up together are making a beautiful story of conversion of France, something that is partly completely difficult to explain, providential, after years of very strong suffering of sex scandal, sexual abuse scandals, and many other scandals and loss of faith. There is also something that we cannot explain that is purely providential, a gift from God, which I think is quite fascinating.
And we will continue to watch it with your help. Solene Tadie, thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely.
Well, that's it for Register Radio for this week. Remember, for more news, analysis, and commentary, check out the National Catholic Register online at ncregister.com. Until next week, I'm Matthew Bunson on behalf of our producer, Michael McCall, and Shannon Mullen. Please take care and God bless.